The following conversation between Mike and Stacy is a continuation of Stacy's investigation of Billy Shears' ancestry, which he believes is derived from the Douglas-Hamilton and Percy bloodlines. To better understand the context of this discussion, watching Stacy's previous presentation from September 2023 would be beneficial. The link to that show is in the description box below. It is also helpful if the listener is familiar with the Memoirs of Billy Shears, since parts of the discussion refer back to the book. The discussion is free-flowing and wide-ranging, more of a conversation than an interview. Stacy shares her thoughts on Billy's education, including the possibility of attending a band camp in Michigan, and the prospect of Billy being subjected to mind control programs as part of a grooming process. The conspiracy surrounding the Beatles is much more involved than the replacement of Paul McCartney in 1966. The Billy Shears story is one of secret societies, bloodlines, the occult, and deep state social engineering. And without further ado, here's the conversation with Stacy. Thank you for listening.
Well, folks, Stacy is back with us, and for those of you who don't know, Stacy did the presentation going back, I guess, a year or a year and a half ago. She did a presentation putting forth her research into the possibilities of who Billy's mother and father are and his family tree, his lineage, and it was very, very compelling. So with this presentation, we have a couple of things that we're going to cover. There's going to be you mentioned some clarifications from the first presentation, and we'll get started with that. But then you're going to take us through where you believe Billy went to school, and you mentioned a band camp in Michigan.
Yes.
And folks, I don't know anything about Stacy's presentation other than the bullets I'm reading right here, so this is going to be a first for me as well. And then you wanted to talk a little bit about Billy's father and the trauma-based mind control program. Did I get everything?
Yes.
Okay, good. And so we have the first slide up, Stacy, and if there's anything you want to say before you get started, let me know, or we could just jump into the slide.
Yeah, well, let's do that, some clarification, because there were some things I thought, I wish I would have told Mike about that. I said that he was related to Lady Diana, maybe fourth or fifth cousins, and I just wanted to give those details. So real quick, they're both direct descendants of the fourth Duke of Richmond. So it goes like this. Diana's paternal grandmother's grandmother is the daughter of the fifth Duke of Richmond, and Billy's maternal grandmother's grandfather is the son of the fifth Duke of Richmond. Also in the book, remember how he talks about one day on a visit with his father, they were playing dice and he rolled 3 6s?
Yeah.
Well, he was the first of 6 boys. He would have been the 15th Duke of Hamilton, 1 + 5 is 6. But his mother just had to be one of 6 maidens in the 37 coronation. So he really did roll 3 6s in life, didn't he?
Oh, very interesting. Okay.
And then I kind of told you about this. I emailed you and told you that I found out Billy and Linda's daughter, Stella, her middle name is Nina, after Billy's paternal grandmother.
Yes.
Linda's paternal grandmother, her name was Stella, and her maternal grandmother's birth name was Estelle, but she went by Stella too. In the book, he talks about when Brian Jones went to jail for possession of marijuana, and then they wrote this. John had the idea of writing a song, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number, because he came home to the St. John Wood home, and there was a phone book with those words on it, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number.
Yeah.
And in the song, and I think it's John Lennon's those are the only lyrics, except John Lennon at one point says, You know me number 2, you know me number 3, you know me number 4. Well, this is what I'm imagining. There's 6 boys, so the note probably said, because he's just fresh off of the Monterey Pop Festival where they distributed LSD, and maybe son number 4 left a note that said, Hey, son number 1, can you hook me up? Hook a brother up. You know my name. Look up the number. Signed, son number 4.
So let me make sure I understand. When we talk about 2, 3, 4. Who are we referring to?
All the sons. 'Cause there's 6 sons. Billy's son number 1.
Okay, his siblings.
Yes. And
Okay.
you know me number 2, you know me number 3, you know me number 4. Well, the 4th sibling at that time would have been 18 or 19 years old. It was Hugh. He was the first to pass away. But about that time, 67, 68 is when I'm thinking it was. He would have been 18 or 19. Billy says that was he thinks it's one of the most humorous songs of the Billy Paul songs.
He says that, if I recall, that it was a Beatles song that was the closest thing to a Bonzo Dog Band song,
Yes.
a Vivian Stanshall song.
And he said it was John's idea to just, those were the only lyrics, is, you know my name, look up the number. Listen to the whole song, that's all they say.
Yeah, I never liked it, by the way. I thought it was a terrible song and boring. But that's just me.
Okay, let's get into this first slide. So, William de Percy, I found out that, he died on the First Crusade, and he died within sight of Jerusalem, supposedly, and they brought his heart back to England for burial. Well, it's buried Whitby Abbey. Whitby Abbey is up on this hill that overlooks the town of Whitby in the North Sea. And sometime after that, I think the 1300s, they also built a church, St. Mary's Church. And then so the townspeople could get up to this church, they built these steps, and it has its own Wikipedia page, the 199 steps. There's landings along the way so that a funeral procession, it says, could stop and rest. So I'm thinking, that's the real heart of the country, isn't it? There's the one on the Douglas side, but this is the real heart of the country.
So when we talk about William de Percy, if you can just remind the audience, Stacy, who we are referring to relative to Billy.
William de Percy's from Billy's mother's side, and he founded the House of Percy in 1067 when he went from France to England and became a feudal land baron. And there's that license plate on the cover of Abbey Road with his initials and death date. And now it makes sense why he would put that license plate and a funeral procession on the cover of an album called Abbey Road. This is the Abbey Road going up to the Abbey where his ancestor's heart is buried.
Okay, and what I'll do is I will take the clip from the first interview where you talk about the license plate, and I'll slip it into the end of this presentation so people can take a listen to it without you having to go over it again.
Okay. And the name meaning of Wallace is foreigner or stranger. So William de Percy, when he arrived in England, he was William Wallace the foreigner. And then on the cover of Abbey Road, Billy is William Wallace the stranger.
Okay, explain that.
Well, there's all that, the chapter about William Wallace, and he says he's just a direct descendant of William Wallace, right?
Right.
And we couldn't figure that out because William Wallace had no children. And he's using it as metaphor for his true bloodline, which goes back to the Percys, William de Percy from France. And there's that whisper message, Monsieur, Monsieur, how about another one? And Billy's the other William Wallace.
Okay, so when he mentions William Wallace, he's making a connection back to the Percys.
Yes. And he says in the book, I'm a direct descendant of William Wallace. You can't get any closer than that. And it's just metaphor for his true ancestor.
Okay. And the last name Wallace, again, means what?
Name Wallace means foreigner or stranger.
So this is, folks, when I talk about the encoding in memoirs, this is what we're talking about. It takes a lot of research and a lot of brain power to break it down and to see where it leads.
You did a video where you said, don't get lost in the sauce. And that was so good because it's so easy to get lost in the sauce.
Yep.
So back when all I knew about was James Douglas, I thought, all right, from now on, I will just, if I find I'm ankle deep, I'll turn around and head back to shore. Once I did that, everything just flowed. It sailed along pretty quickly. Back then, I was looking to find more about James Douglas. That was Robert the Bruce's first lieutenant. And what's the lazy way to do it is try and find a movie. I found this movie that was made. I found out about it. I could never find the movie. But I was looking at the who wrote it and directed it, produced it. It was this guy named Bob Carruthers. And in the footnotes of the Wikipedia page said Bob Carruthers in 2015 or 16 filed a claim on a trademark claim on the name of the Bonzo dog band. And ultimately the courts ruled against him, but it was just a weird coincidence.
That is weird.
It is weird, but it kept, that's the one thing that kept me looking into the Douglases, because I thought something's going on here with this Bob guy. Why would he even make that claim anyway? And then by the time I get, a long time later, when I get to William de Percy's Wikipedia page, which it's right there that his heart is buried at this Whitby Cattle, but I missed it because I just looked at the death date and I was like, fine, moving on, because I was trying not to get lost in the sauce. So.
And Heart of the Country, of course, is a reference to Billy's song on his Ram album.
Yes, and he had that art show where the Queen went and they're standing in front of his painting of a heart. And if you zoom in on it, you can see etched in, he's got a silhouette of a female figure. So I think to him, the real heart of the country is this Percy side, not the Douglas side, that they carried Robert the Bruce's heart back to Scotland.
Now, I mentioned to you before we got started that Dom and Chris Watterson, they're taking a look into Jane Asher's bloodlines, and they found that she is related to the Percy bloodline as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very strange, very weird, because that means that Billy has Percy blood, Jane Asher has Percy blood, so it's all in the family.
Yeah, it explains why she just made that transition from Paul to Billy so quietly.
Yeah, she was playing a part, if you ask me.
Born into it.
Yeah. I mean, they're playing these characters, they're playing these roles, whether they want to or not, is my opinion. Doesn't necessarily mean they want to do something, but I don't think many times they have a choice. I think it's something they have to do in order to play out what it is that they want to play out.
It's like they feel it's their duty to the family or something.
Yep, obligation to the family. And so Billy and Jane Asher, based upon your research, and Chris and Dom's, are related. Anyway, so the Whitby 199 steps, you believe that's a reference to Abbey Road, going to the Abbey.
Going to the Abbey.
So what we're saying here is that his mother's side of the family, the Percy bloodline, is very prominent in Billy's storytelling, maybe more prominent or more important than his Douglas-Hamilton, his father's lineage, correct?
In its own way, yes, but there's nothing bigger in Scotland than the Douglas-Hamiltons. I mean, sometimes you think it's maybe the Duke of Argyll, but when you look at the history, I think it's the Douglas-Hamiltons. I mean, he is the premier peer of Scotland.
I'm speaking from Billy's perspective. It seems like he aligns himself, or he leans more toward his mother's side of the equation.
It does seem like he reveres that side even more, doesn't it?
That's my perception. I mean, I could be wrong, but it seems like that's what he does.
Let's move over to the Americas. In Death Cab for Cutie, he sings about slipping and sliding down Highway 31, right?
Right.
Highway 31 begins in northern Michigan, just south of Mackinac Island, and it runs all the way down to Alabama. You know, Kathy O'Brien is from Muskegon, Michigan, and Highway 31 goes through Muskegon County. The Jacksons, Jackson 5. They're from Gary, Indiana, and Highway 31 goes right through Gary, Indiana. Then I found this band camp in Michigan. I heard about it because of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell would recruit kids from there. Highway 31 goes through Interlaken, and there's this band camp that was founded in 1928, and it was for kids, a sleepaway band camp for kids 9 to 18 years old, and it was for marching bands. So, and back then, of course, there was this John Philip Sousa, who was he's a composer. He wrote Stars and Stripes Forever. He's called the March King. He was a sergeant in the U.S. Marines. And on the left there is J.W. Pepper, which is J.W. Pepper and Sons was the largest publisher of sheet music in the world. They're still around. They still publish sheet music. So I think that here's Sergeant Pepper right here between these two. Billy sings about 20 years ago today. Sergeant Pepper taught the band to play. Well, in 1947, Billy's 10 years old. He's old enough to go to this band camp.
A lot of people think that Sergeant Pepper is Aleister Crowley, but you're saying perhaps no.
Oh, yeah, it's these two. They literally taught the band to play. Between Sousa and J.W. Pepper, you don't have a marching band. And on the cover of Sergeant Pepper, I mean, they're in those costumes. It's a marching band they're in the costumes of.
Right.
At one point, Sousa wanted a instrument made that would be tuba-like, but would be easier to march with. So he gets this sousaphone made. And J.W. Pepper at the time, now they're just a sheet music publisher. At the time, he also made instruments. So supposedly he made this sousaphone for Pepper, but it's kind of still a controversy because there's another man named C.G. Kahn who made instruments. He was in Elkhart, Indiana, not far from Highway 31. He had this public feud with J.W. Pepper. It was sort of a public feud because C.G. Kahn had a newspaper too, and he would write terrible things about him. In fact, a judge at one point made him publicly apologize to Pepper for something. And C.G. Kahn had a really rough time. He had bad luck, it seems. He was in a bar fight one night, got his lip split open, and he found he couldn't play his wind instrument, whatever that was.
C.G. Kahn is?
C.G. Kahn is an instrument maker from Elkhart, Indiana. He was also a newspaper publisher, and he made things for sewing machines. So he already had a factory. He invented a rubber mouthpiece to play so he could play his trumpet or whatever it was he played. And he called it a face. It made me think about Eleanor Rigby, the face that she keeps in the jar by the door. You know how in the 1950s, when a girl was going steady with a boy, she would wear his class ring on a chain around her neck?
Yes.
So maybe it was her husband's face. Maybe it was her wedding. Maybe her groom was off with the band as soon as the rice hit the floor. And she kind of had a lonely life because, you know, when you're in the band, it's exclusive. Your family is left behind. All the lonely people. The fans are lonely for the band to come back to town once they leave. The book invites you to look at the headstone. And Eleanor Rigby did have a husband. His name was Thomas Woods. Can't find anything out about Thomas Woods, but I've imagined what if this Thomas Woods was in Paul's father's band or something.
So your point being that Eleanor Rigby's husband was in a band and he wasn't home very often.
In the song, I think that's what it's about, is that Eleanor Rigby was a band widow, basically. And the face that she kept in a jar by the door was one of his mouthpieces for his wind instrument. And that's why it starts out with talking about there's been a wedding. She's cleaning up after a wedding. Or maybe it was her wedding, her own wedding.
Because I've always wondered, keeping a face in the jar by the door, what did that mean?
Yeah, who is it for? Well, who is it for? It's her husband. That's
Yeah,
a band widow. That's a good way to put it. Eleanor Rigby was a band widow.
very interesting.
Okay, so this Interlaken that starts in 19, founded in 1928. It's still around. It's gone from just a band camp for marching bands. Now it's a full-on art school. Jeffrey Epstein went there in 66 or 67. You know, he played piano, but to go to this camp, he picked up the bassoon. And then one of the lawsuits against Ghislaine Maxwell, the Jane Doe, and this is easy to find, it's public information. She claims that she was recruited by Ghislaine and Epstein from Interlaken. So
And Interlaken is the name of the school?
the name of this band camp, yes.
Oh, okay.
I think it's been an intelligence cutout from the beginning. It was started in 1928 as part of this national program. They wanted to bring music into schools. So this program was started in Washington by a couple of bankers. It's been a long time, so I forgot their names, but this band camp got started because of that program. They were putting music in all the schools. And there's something about that Highway 31. I mean, with Kathy O'Brien being from there and the Jacksons. And I've heard Kathy O'Brien talk about Mackinac Island and the Masonic lodges there. And so I think a lot goes on. There's, in fact, just a month ago, they're conducting an investigation into some people that went there in the 60s and 70s are saying they were abused. So Interlaken's conducting their own investigation about it. I'm sure they'll find that nothing was wrong. Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think it was a cutout the whole time. It was to get access to kids. Billy says when he's talking about all the other musicians and the other bands, and he says we were all very close. And you think at the time that it's because of the time they spent in the studio together at these music festivals, whatever. But maybe it goes back further. Maybe it goes back to their shared experiences at this band camp with the Freemasons and also with MK Ultra. Maybe that's why they're all so close. There's another interesting thing, that Beach Boys song, Kokomo. Kokomo, and it's about a fictional island in the Caribbean. Well, Kokomo, Indiana is on Highway 31, and it's 333 miles south of Interlaken via Highway 31. It's a Beach Boys song. I always think, well, Brian Wilson wrote it, but no, it was written by John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas, his childhood friend from Virginia, Scott McKenzie, Terry Melcher, who was Doris Day's son,
Right,
and Michael Love of the Beach Boys. That recording, Ry Cooder played on that recording. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He started playing guitar when he was 3, the story goes. He has a prosthetic eye. They say that he had an accident with a knife when he was 4 years old. And that's an interesting coincidence, isn't it?
it certainly is. And going back for a moment to Brian Wilson, I have always found the story around Brian Wilson as far as being a genius songwriter and all that stuff to be very suspect. In 1974, he hooked up with that psychiatrist, I think for 15 years. And for 15 years, he was essentially sedated. And prior to 1974, I don't know. I always thought that Brian Wilson was another veneer, another prop, like many of these people were. Perhaps he was also in a program and he was groomed and brought along to play the role that he played. Speculative on my part, Stacy, but it's just something doesn't resonate with me with regard to Brian Wilson.
Yes, and his brother was always very troubled. I think they were probably in MK Ultra programming. Father was very abusive. You don't read anything about them getting music training when they were young. There's nothing about that. I guess they could harmonize.
Well, it's very similar to the Beatles, John Lennon and Paul McCartney. They sang.
Mm.
Many of these stories in these bands, I know a lot of people are probably going nuts right now because there's always this thing where, yes, maybe they were like that, but not my band. Many of these bands were manufactured, engineered, and the key players in these bands were, in my mind, in all likelihood, brought along, handled, groomed, and in programs.
Yeah, hear that because I'm a fan of the Grateful Dead, and through all of this, and I always knew, of course, they were connected to Stanford Research Institute,
CIA.
and the CIA. But I always thought, well, the Dead's so different because they don't go out and lip sync. All the shows are live. And I'm going to talk about it today. I mean, they were very, very close to Billy.
Well, that's something also that we should talk about just a little bit when, especially with regard to my work, people will make claims like, oh, Mike is saying that the Beatles couldn't play their instruments. I never said that. I never said that. And I never said that all these other bands couldn't play, that they weren't musicians. I think there were varying degrees of skill and musicianship, but many of them were clearly adept enough or skilled enough on their instrument to take the shows out live. And some of them were very good musicians, but it's all in support of an agenda. And that's the point I've been trying to get across. We're talking about the Grateful Dead, the Beach Boys, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. And we can go on and on and on. Led Zeppelin.
When they're playing a huge arena and you're playing every night and the concert's so perfect, of course they're playing to a track.
It's just how the business operates. It's how it works because they're selling a product.
Yes.
And the band is a product. It's like putting a really nice label on something in the store to make it appealing to a potential buyer or consumer. And the music industry is no different. So when I say like the Beatles didn't play on the recorded tracks, especially between 62 and 66, they interpret that as me saying that the Beatles couldn't play their instruments. And that's not what I'm saying. There's a big difference between skill level in the studio and skill level when you're out playing live.
Right. Yeah, you never said that.
In fact, I was going to do a video and the title of it was going to be 3 things that people say I said that I never said.
Say what you want about me as long as it's the truth.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
See, I'm going to jump to something else real quick. In the book, when he talks about, there's a whole chapter about Your Song, Elton John's big hit.
Yep.
It says how it was written for Three Dog Night, and then they gave it to Elton John. And Billy's talking about how he's Rumpelstiltskin, making the gold. At first, it didn't hit me, but Billy wrote that song. Did you realize that?
No, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because in that chapter, he's talking about how people will say about all of these songs he's written for other bands that no one knows about. He'll say sometimes they call them McCartney-esque. We look in the Wikipedia page for Your Song, Elton John's Your Song. It details how a Rolling Stone reviewer at the time described that song as McCartney-esque. And here's what happened. Elton John's first album came out. It didn't do much commercially. Then he has a huge hit with Your Song, and he was off to the show. In the next chapter, I think it's the next chapter, it's been a long time, he's talking about Billy Joel and playing together. And I looked up into Billy Joel's career. His first album didn't do much commercially. And then Piano Man came out, and that made his career. Billy wrote Piano Man too, because when you look at the Wikipedia page for Piano Man, it says, I don't know if you remember that song, but John's the bartender and Paul is sitting at the bar. It says in that page that the song was about real life people. And Billy also says that when he was producing and doing these other things for these other bands, that he would use the name Bill Martin.
Right.
Gives you the impression that he got that name Bill Martin from George Martin. Billy Joel tells this story about how, well, I had my first album in New York and I needed to get away from the record label for a while. They were harassing me about another album or something. So I went to LA and I started playing in piano bars. And I couldn't use my real name. So I used my middle name, my first and middle name, which his name was William Martin Joel. But it's just such a nonsense story. But I went, oh my God, Billy wrote that song too. And the lyrics go, John at the bar is a friend of mine. He gives me my drinks for free. And he says something about, I think that I could have been a movie star if I could get out of this place. And we know John wanted to be an actor. He wanted to leave the music industry, maybe become an actor. And then Paul, that's sitting at the bar, he's a real estate novelist. And he's talking with Davy, who's still in the Navy and probably will be for life. Well, that makes me wonder, who was Paul with that night? Was he with someone from the Navy? If Billy wrote the song, I think he did.
You think he did? Okay.
If you look into it, I think you'll end up agreeing.
Well, it's kind of weird. You have John and Paul, the names in the song, and you have Bill Martin or Billy Martin. That ties directly back to Billy. I don't know. I'm not going to discount it. I think anything is possible when we're talking about this topic.
Well, and it seems like with that McCartney-esque quote being in the Wikipedia page of your song, it seems like somebody's making sure that these clues are easy to follow up on.
Yeah, it would go along with Billy dropping these clues and these hints in order to, I guess maybe in his mind, receiving the credit that he believes he should be receiving for what he's accomplished.
Yes. And once you get on the trail of his family, they all have Wikipedia pages. Why would William de Percy, born in 10-something, have a Wikipedia page?
Right.
Oh, you remember how on the William de Percy, it says a death date of 1096 and then it says /9?
Yes. Yeah. I remember that.
Found out what that 9 is for. There's this idea that there were 9 original Templars. In fact, there's a sculpture garden in France where it's a sculpture of 3 heads. I was watching this video and this guy said, oh, look, there's a sculpture for the 9 original Templars. And you look into it and they think there were 9 original and then the rest of them were kind of along for the ride. I've looked at the list of names. William de Percy isn't listed as one of the 9, but since he was on that first crusade, he was with the 9 original Templars. So that's what that 9 is for. I thought it had to do with Paul. Anyway, this whole thing with the songs and trying to figure out what songs he may have written, because he was Rumpelstiltskin, it's kind of got me fascinated. He says he's left information in a safe deposit box or something to release after his death. I'm hoping it's his songbook because I would love to find out more about what he was involved with.
Yeah, that would be very interesting indeed. However, I'm not sure how much is going to be revealed after he passes. It may take years after he passes before they start to leak stuff out.
And then on the other hand, it seems like they don't care anymore. Kind of like
I agree with that. He doesn't seem to care anymore at all. I mean, he's really not, playing the game as far as trying to keep up the character. If he got up in front of a podium on mainstream media and said, hey, I'm not Paul McCartney. My name is William Douglas-Hamilton. People would just laugh and say, oh, he's so funny. We love Paul McCartney. And that would be that.
Another show. It's another show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's such a comedian. Anyway, I'm derailing you.
I found out that in October of '69, the Bonzos played with the Grateful Dead in Boston. And that fascinated me because I know that's only interesting to me, but bear with me because I'm so familiar with them. It's been informative in other ways. When I first saw this, I thought, was that October of '69? That couldn't have been Billy. It had to have been Victor. But I've since discovered that it was actually Billy. The Grateful Dead has this song called Uncle John's Band. And, the Freemasons, their patron saint is John the Revelator because of Revelations. They think that the Apostle John wrote Revelations, and of course they're trying to recreate it. So I think that song, Uncle John, they're all Uncle John's band. All these Aquarian Age bands are Uncle John's band. Let's go north to Canada. Okay, so if you go north on Highway 31 and over Mackinac Island, there's Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and then over the water is Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Sault means waterfall or rapid, which makes you think of the song Waterfalls. Don't go jumping waterfalls. French word Sault means leap. Of course, in that video, there's a polar bear. Everything in that video is significant of something. I think he spent time in Canada. His uncle, George, was the Baron of Selkirk, and there is a Selkirk, Manitoba. There's also a Brandon, Manitoba, and of course the title is the Duke of Hamilton and Brandon, and Selkirk is one of their titles too. So Sault Ste. Marie, I looked up the definition, and here it is. He got that song from those towns, I think. Sault Ste. Marie, because that's what it means. In French, a leap, it's a waterfall or rapid, and he says in the song, don't go jumping waterfalls. I'm imagining him going to boarding school in Canada and then in the summers having to go to this band camp, and it was a dangerous place to be because who knows what they were doing. In that song, Death Cab for Cutie, slipping and sliding down Highway 31. Well, what went on Highway 31 with the Jacksons, Kathy O'Brien, John Phillips, and all those guys? Something about that area. Okay, so we're going north. We're in Canada now. In the book, it mentions, he's talking about Fern Hill, the poem by Dylan Thomas. With regards to Penny Lane, he said he was kind of trying to make Penny Lane seem like this lovely, sweet place. And so he referred to the poem Fern Hill. It's mentioned 3 times. Fern Hill is on page 253, 289, and 290. And then when the edition came out with all the whisper messages, on page 253 alone, Fern Hill is mentioned 3 times. So that's significant of something, right? I found there's these Fern Hill schools. There's several in the UK. There's 2 in Ontario, and they're they're boarding schools for elementary school kids, ages like 5 to 13 or something. These Fern Hill schools are in an association of schools called Round Square. It's an association of which is Masonic, right? Round Square. There's 260 schools in 50 countries in this association, and they're on every continent. They're all over the place. So I wondered if he went to school there, but we're going to have to put a big red asterisk under that because I found out just yesterday that the timeline doesn't work out. These places were founded later, but it was worth mentioning because Fern Hill's mentioned so many times. Then in the first chapter, in the acrostical coding, it says it was a trip from LC. It's just the initials. And then it's in the footnote too. This is on page 30. It says LC, but the book is talking about Lewis Carroll at the same time. And you're thinking, well, maybe those initials are for Lewis Carroll, a trip from LC. Well, Lewis Carroll would take Alice Little and her sisters on boat trips and tell them stories. So I thought that's maybe what it was. But it's mentioned a 3rd time in a little acrostical booklet. It says it was a trip from LC. So that's 3 times again. I found a boarding school in Ontario called Lakefield College School. It's for high school kids. It was founded in 1879. It was called the Grove Preparatory School for Boys. In 1895, it was purchased by Reverend from the Anglican Church called Alexander Mackenzie. And then he was the headmaster there for almost 4 decades. That would have been if Billy went there, he would have missed Alexander Mackenzie, but I'm sure his presence was still felt. In 1966, they changed their name to Lakefield College School. Their school colors are red and green, which is very unusual. That made me think of the double box set of memoirs, which is red, and the double box set lyrics, which is green. It's like the public narrative is green, and then the private one is red. There's also a saying in England, red and green should not be seen.
Well, also Alexander Mackenzie, and you have Father Mackenzie.
Yes, it gets better. Did you ever see, a few years ago, I think Boris Johnson was the prime minister and Rishi Sunak was the money guy, but he came out of number 10 and he was carrying a red folder, and he walks behind a car, and when he emerges from the other side, that red folder magically turned green. And it was all over Twitter and stuff. People were wondering what. When I saw it, I thought, oh, well, they're just signaling to the insiders about this budget or whatever they were talking about. Don't worry what you're about to hear about this in the media, because it has nothing to do with what really happened inside.
So the red folder would represent what actually took place, and the green folder is for public consumption.
Yes. You never saw that video of them. It's interesting. What they ended up telling the public is, well, we wanted to let the public know that this budget is going to be very green conscious, because no one bought the fact that it would have it happen on its own. Why did it turn green? We know why, right? Then I found out that their mascot is a terrapin turtle, which fascinated me because look at the album cover for the Grateful Dead's Terrapin Station. It's red and green with terrapin turtles. On the right, that's Egypt Station. I'm thinking maybe that's Billy and Uncle George with his intelligence umbrella that's an octagon.
Uncle George being?
Billy's Uncle George. He's the Baron of Selkirk, right? And there's a Selkirk, Manitoba, and a Brandon, Manitoba. Billy's Uncle George was made an honorary chief of the Saulteaux Indian tribe in 66 or 67. I'm imagining because he was the Baron of Selkirk. So I think the links with Canada are all over the place. And I wonder if Billy didn't end up going to Canada with his Uncle George. Maybe that's what this image is about.
I'm a little lost with Uncle George. Mike, you dummy.
Oh, I told you I was going to skip around today.
That's okay.
It's all these rabbit holes. It's so random. Okay, so Uncle George, that we think called George Martin and said, hey, my nephew's going to play this role.
Oh, that Uncle George. Okay.
He was the Baron of Selkirk, even though his brother was the Duke, but he was the Baron of Selkirk. And I don't know how it really works with Canada being in the Commonwealth, but there is a Brandon, Manitoba, which they hold the title to the Duke of Brandon, and Selkirk, Manitoba. And I imagine these towns were named back when it was officially part of the UK and more than the Commonwealth. But there's this tribe, the Saulteaux tribe, made Uncle George an honorary chief in 66 or 67. Why would a Indigenous tribe in Canada do that except they were honoring him somehow?
Now, his Uncle George, is he linked into the Douglas-Hamilton side of the equation or the Percys?
Douglas-Hamilton.
Douglas-Hamilton, okay. Now, for the folks that don't know, in Memoirs, it tells us that when Paul was replaced, that George Martin had received a call and was told that this is the person that's going to play the role, and that person was Billy. So when we're talking about Uncle George, that's the Uncle George that made the phone call to tell George Martin Billy was the new Paul McCartney.
Yeah, and Billy says something. Once he was 3 years old, he was officially in this program. And when he says about that day he was playing rolling dice with his father, he said, on a visit with my father, it sounds like he didn't live with his father, doesn't it? Sounds like he didn't live with the family.
I read somewhere, it was maybe Henry Mackau. I just found it by accident, and he was talking about Douglas Hamilton and said that during World War II, he was with the fifth column. That would mean that he was sympathetic to the quote enemy.
Enemy being the Germans?
Yeah, it would be the Germans.
Well, there was that incident with Rudolf Hess, wasn't there?
Yes, and Hess had reached out. Well, the story goes that he reached out to Douglas Hamilton. They had known each other, I guess, from a visit that Douglas Hamilton made in Germany before the war broke out. And so he and Hess knew each other. So that would say that his father was sympathetic to the Germans.
Yes, and that was a big controversy at the time. And Billy's brother, James, son number 3, wrote a couple of books about his father, and they're both about that incident with Hess.
And I read also that Crowley was involved in that, in typical Crowley storytelling, that he had performed a ritual to make that incident happen where Hess flew over to England. That's the story.
Well, and we do wonder about the royal family's involvement with Hitler and how he was funded, and there's no clear story yet.
I just thought that was interesting when I read that his father was with the fifth column. And again, I don't want anybody taking this to the bank. I came across this and I was looking for more information, and it just stopped right there.
There's a lot said about maybe the royal family's involvement. It's just, you can't get a clear story on it. So it's almost like, all right, you guys figure it out and then let me know. Anyway, so this is Terrapin Station on the left, and it's Billy's Egypt Station on the right. And I just, for interest, I looked up the definition of station. Used as a verb, it's put in or assigned to a specified place for a particular purpose, especially a military one. If I was to guess anyone with the Grateful Dead that may have gone to Lakefield College, it would have been Jerry's lyricist, Robert Hunter, who was the one that wrote the lyrics to this song, Terrapin Station. And the Illuminati may use that Egyptian Bible as their Bible. I mean, Manny P. Hall says that the Egyptian Bible was, he said, the open sesame to symbolic masonry. I think there's a big reason Billy's so into Egypt. With this terrapin being their mascot at this Lakefield College, the Fabian Society, their coat of arms is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and their logo is a turtle. Fabian Society was founded in like 1885, 1886, something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They named themselves after the Roman general Fabius Maximus, and the Fabian strategy is, it's a military tactic characterized by avoiding open, decisive battles and instead focusing on wearing down an enemy through a war of attrition. The march to the New World Order. So maybe this Lakefield College is Masonic. It's also Fabian. Goes way back. Okay, I was looking at that picture of Paul's dad's band. Must have been the 1920s. And there's that photograph of Paul's dad with a bunch of people in it. And someone commented underneath, this is giving me vibes of The Shining. You know, that last scene in The Shining when Kubrick zooms in on the picture on the wall, and it zooms in and it's Jack Nicholson's face.
Yeah.
And I remembered it said 1921, but what I didn't remember is that it was Independence Day. And I thought, okay, this is Kubrick letting us know they want their colonies back. And maybe, you know how in the book, everything that's in the book is there for a reason. And Billy mentions that Paul's dad got his piano from Brian Epstein's family back in the day. Remember that?
Yes.
Why put that detail in there? But it's just to let us know that Paul's dad was hooked in with the Epsteins a long time ago. And I'm seeing this, I'm wondering, with all the other movies Kubrick made, is he saying, was this British invasion planned as far back as 1921 after World War One? Because they want their alloidial title back.
Well, that's the same time period that the Tavistock Clinic was created. That's the same time period that the Frankfurt School came together. A lot of things happened in the early 1920s.
Yeah, it seems maybe it was because of World War One and how it turned out, and maybe they wanted to. And some people even say, well, we were supposed to go from World War One to World War Two. World War Two happened because of the Treaty of Versailles.
Right. It was a thorn in Hitler's side because he served in World War One. And I'm not going to get into whether people believe Hitler was this or that. I'm just saying. Now, the thing, Stacy, also is that I always suspected that biological Paul's father was up to his eyeballs in what went on.
Yeah, I mean, Billy says in the book that he was prepared. He used that word prepared. It was as if he wasn't all that shocked that Paul had died. He'd been prepared. And with him being in a band, I don't know, all of these bands, it's a way for them to recruit people. Oh, so Kubrick, he was born in New York, but in 1960 he moved to England and he stayed there the rest of his life. Maybe he was a Fabian. All of his movies have clues about something, like Eyes Wide Shut,
Right.
In Canada, of course, Ewan Cameron, and at the McGill School, he started that Allen Memorial Clinic in the 50s and was supposedly one of the most brutal MK Ultra doctors.
He was evil.
Yes. Now, he was born in Scotland in 1901, so a year after Billy's father. Wonder if they maybe knew each other. In 1929, he went to Brandon, Manitoba, and worked in the psychiatric hospital there. He was there for 7 years. He was all over the place. He went to Switzerland. He was in Massachusetts for a while, Maryland at Johns Hopkins, and New York. And he actually lived in New York when he was commuting to Allen Memorial Clinic in the 50s. Now, I thought, well, the timeline doesn't really work with Billy because if the Allen Memorial Clinic didn't get started until the 50s, but now I see here the Rockefellers gave him 40 grand in 1943. And I don't think they're just going to sit back while he waits until the 50s to start doing what he's doing. In 43, Billy's 6 years old. And it says it was a trip from LC, a trip from Lakefield College. Maybe the trip was going from Lakefield College to see Dr. Cameron, who other MK Ultra survivors say that they went by code name. He was Dr. White. Joseph Mengele was Dr. Green. They would, I don't know if you've ever read Fritz Springmeier's How to Make an Illuminati, an undetectable Illuminati slave. But that goes into detail about how they would visit each other's facility. So this Dr. Cameron would go to California and other places where they were, like Stanford, Presidio in San Francisco.
So are you saying, Stacy, you think it's possible that Billy was in a program that involved you and Cameron?
Yes, because it's in there 3 times. It was a trip from LC, and at first you think it's Lewis Carroll, but Lewis Carroll's name's written right there. Why not just write it out? Well, maybe it's a trip from Lakefield College, and I know they didn't change their name to Lakefield College until 1966, but with their colors being red and green, the terrapin, and his links with the Grateful Dead, which are many, many links, I think maybe they, like I was saying, they were all very close. And maybe they were all very close, not just because of time in the studio, but shared experiences at the band camp, Lakefield College, time in the program. And even for some of these kids, like let's say Robert Hunter did go to Lakefield College for a year, like I speculate about. He was Jerry's lyricist.
Yeah.
He was 5 years younger, so he wouldn't have been there at the same time as Billy. But all of these guys, like John Phillips and Terry Melcher, could have crossed paths with boys from Lakefield while they were at that band camp. And it was for kids 9 to 18 years old. So they would have crossed paths with them. they've also could have crossed paths in the MK Ultra program, which was extensive. There were a lot of kids in it. There are people now saying that they were put into a gifted program in school, and what they really were doing was doing mind control experiments on them. I try to be careful with that whole scene because there's a lot of grifters and gatekeepers.
Yep.
I don't know what's true. And then to read Fritz Springmeier's work, which I think is pretty valid, but it's hard to read. It's just so bizarre and it's not well written, but there's info in there. And we know that Robert Hunter volunteered to go to Stanford to take LSD, and then of course the Grateful Dead did the acid tests, and the Grateful Dead were at the Monterey Pop Festival where Billy says he went in June of '67 to distribute LSD.
He was part of the group that was organizing with John Phillips.
Yes, and then there's John Phillips writing a song Kokomo about a fictional island, but really it's a town 333 miles south of Interlaken. Oh, speaking of that, okay, so that Scott McKenzie that was childhood friends with John Phillips from Virginia. In his Wikipedia page, his birth name was something Blondheim, Philip Blondheim. And he says one night in Ontario, they were in Ontario, and he said to his friends, I think this name isn't very good for, a good music name. I need to pick something else. And someone suggested Mackenzie. And they said, oh, Scott McKenzie. So he became Scott McKenzie. And then he says, and that's also when John Phillips decided to name his daughter Mackenzie. And I just couldn't help but think of the Lakefield College. And
yeah, Scott McKenzie had a big hit in '67 with the song San Francisco. Be sure to wear flowers in your hair. And I just looked him up, which sold in excess of 7 million copies internationally.
Oh, and Eleanor Rigby, he sings about the Father Mackenzie and the funeral that no one was there. In MK Ultra program, when they're programming in all these altars, they like to have 2 or 3 of them that don't have names. This is according to Fritz Springmeier. And so they'll have 2 or 3 that are called No One, Nobody, or Mr. Nobody. So in Eleanor Rigby, when he says no one was there, he could also be talking about himself as an altar. In Waterfalls, the first time in the video, the first time he gets on the carousel,
yeah,
he uses his right hand. Fritz says that the altars, in their minds, the altars are organized on a carousel. They put mirrors in the center and demons behind the mirrors to protect the programming. And what they'll do is they'll wear a bracelet on their wrist to keep them in a particular altar, to keep them from flipping to a different one accidentally. Billy gets on the carousel. He's got a bracelet on his right hand, and he goes around, and his first time around, he starts to reach for the pole in front of him with his left hand where there's no bracelet. And at the last moment, he changes and grabs the pole with his right hand. So he won't hold on to that carousel unless he's using the hand with the bracelet. He's also wearing the same bracelet in Wonderful Christmas Time. You can see it for just a moment when he's playing the piano. He's got altars going.
Well, the book says he was in a program, so altars go along with the program.
Yes, and he was programmed to be such a great musician. I mean, maybe they programmed in more than one musician altar.
Yeah, the book says that his programming, the key to it was that there is no failure. There's only success. And that was to groom him to be very, very motivated, highly motivated to pursue the goals that were laid out for him.
Yes, and it says the danger, I think it's Tom's footnote, says the danger really comes from within himself. And they do program that in. They'll program the body to just slow down the respiratory system until they just die, according to Springmeier. When I was trying to find out, I'm fascinated by Helen, his grandmother, Helen. And so I thought, well, what's a way to find out more about her? I thought reading a book biography about the Queen Mother would do it, since she was her mistress of the robes, and they were so close. So I read one, and it didn't say anything about Helen, but she did. She was talking about the Queen Mother and the dynamics between Edward that abdicated and her husband. She was talking about the dynamics of all these titled and the boys, the firstborn son and the secondborn son. And she mentioned that in the families where the firstborn is born out of wedlock, and so the secondborn gets the title, they call the firstborn nowhere men.
Really?
Yeah. So there's that sign.
Wow.
But it also goes to no one was there in Eleanor Rigby. So he's a nowhere man, but he's also maybe got some alters they're just no one.
Yeah, he's a real nowhere man living in his nowhere land.
Yes. Maybe Billy was very involved before. To me, he wrote Eleanor Rigby, and it has everything to do with his time at Interlaken and maybe Lakefield College.
Well, he wrote In My Life. We know that because he admitted it going back a number of years ago. And then the mainstream media went into damage control because the official story says that's a John Lennon song from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. And then Billy had come out and said, no, I wrote the music to that. And he gave credit to the lyrics to John, but we don't even know if that's true. In my big presentation going back to April of 2020, I put a case forward that John did not write those lyrics. So, but in any case, it's interesting. You're talking about nowhere man, alters. Like we said in the book, he talks about the fact that he wasn't a program. So it's pretty dark stuff, Stacy.
Yeah. And when you first look at Cameron, you think, well, if Billy was already older by then, but look at this. It says he got 40 grand in 1943. The Rockefeller Foundation isn't just going to wait 10 years for him to start.
Well, the Rockefeller Foundation was writing checks for Tavistock as well. They were up to their eyeballs in funding mind control programs.
And, even before MK Ultra, the Illuminati have been doing that kind of thing for centuries.
Right.
So 1929, Cameron went to Brandon, Ontario. He was very instrumental in all of the psychiatric hospitals in Western Canada. I think he was just all over Canada.
He was given all kinds of awards and titles.
Oh, did you get this? Did you know that it was Cameron they brought to Nuremberg to assess Rudolf Hess?
I did not know that.
I didn't either. He's the one that he diagnosed him with hysteria and amnesia later on. Hess said he was faking the amnesia. I don't know much about that, but yeah, they brought Cameron there. And then I found out Rudolf Hess was born in British-ruled Egypt, which is weird. I think his grandfather and father, they had some kind of business there. So deep ties to Egypt and associations with the British government.
I don't think Ewan Cameron was diagnosing Rudolf Hess. I think he was probably torturing Rudolf Hess.
That's a very good point. They use him as a manual, don't they? All the things he did. He would put people in comas and...
Yeah, Ewan Cameron wasn't interested in diagnosing. He was interested in experimenting and some gruesome experimenting.
Yeah, well, let's see, I think it's the next one. Yeah, he's the one that did psychic driving. He developed psychic driving, which is where you drug someone and then play a tape on words on a tape loop.
Yep.
And Billy talks about being in the car, and he had a tape player, and he would play things. Didn't he play one night, You Are Paul McCartney or something?
I don't know. Is it in the book? Maybe it's in the book?
Yeah, I think that was in the book. It's been a long time. So, yeah, psychic driving is Ewan Cameron's. And then, of course, Billy has that driving rain.
Yeah. Ewan Cameron was into what he referred to as pattern, repattern. And he was using drugs. He was using electric shock treatment, sensory deprivation, hypnosis. He was using everything. Everything that he could dream of was in his toolbox. Also, driving rain is interesting because rain is associated with Rain Man. And I've covered this in some of my videos. It goes back to the occult, and Rain Man, legend has it, has to do with the Faustian bargain. And we see the Beatles have the song Rain. And if you look on the internet and do a search for Beatles and umbrellas, because umbrellas are also a representation of rain, you're going to find those images out there. So this goes back to what I'm saying, folks, is that it goes back to mind control programs and making deals with the devil.
And these programmers would create keywords and phrases to start a certain program. Like if they were trying to get an assassin.
Exactly.
An assassin that wouldn't, their front altar would have no idea that this was going on.
Yeah.
They just say this key phrase and do whatever they need to do, or even monarch, whatever.
Yeah, triggers.
Yeah. And then all that in the book about the car, about Paul's DB5 and how Brian Epstein found a DB5 that was in Germany, used on a racetrack, but the engine was blown. So he was able to bring that to England, use the body. I wonder if that's all a metaphor for Billy is the German DB5, been trained with Nazi programming, and he's the new body, and they're going to put this engine in it. And then there's also, baby, you can drive my car. Guess I'm going to be a star. It's like you hand someone the keys to your programming so they can drive your programming and they'll make you a star.
It could be.
The carousel in Waterfalls, it doesn't have horses, it has cars.
I gave up on the whole car accident as how Paul departed a long time ago. That's just a story that's out there to keep the people who are looking into Paul as dead and that aspect of the conspiracy, to keep them to spin their wheels, to run on a hamster wheel. That's not what happened.
It was a metaphor, and so are those cars in the waterfalls. It's because, like they say, they organize these altars on a carousel. Billy uses a carousel with cars and not horses, like most carousels.
Right.
And there's all his altars that were put into him by using psychic driving.
Even the whole premise in the book about him believing that he's the reincarnation of Horus is weird. I'm thinking, well, who would believe that? Well, somebody who would believe that would be somebody that is programmed to believe that.
Oh, yeah.
That's something that I thought about going back a number of years ago when I started getting into that whole aspect of the book, this whole Egyptian mythology, Egyptian mythos around Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set. I mean, who walks around thinking that they are the reincarnation of Horus or Krishna?
One of his altars, certainly.
One of his altars, yeah.
Yes. He says that between JFK's assassination and Diana's accident, car crash, there were 33 years, 9 months, and 9 days. I added 33 years, 9 months, and 9 days to that, and it's June 9th, 2031. So we'll have to pay attention and see what they pull then.
How old will he be then?
He'll be 94. So won't that be interesting?
If somebody said to me, when do you think he's going to pass? I've always said, I think 90, which means I think he's 87 now.
Yes.
Yeah. So 3 more years and I can stop talking about him.
You know what else I could see him doing? I could see him if he is around when he's 94, I could see him faking his death on June 9th, 2031, just so he can complete the circle. I mean, why not? You can do whatever else. You have carte blanche, right?
Right.
One Man's Week. I think that's Billy in One Man's Week. I think I emailed you about that.
Yeah.
It's his hand that tells me that, the way the pinky is, the space between there. And then there's that part in it where he's reading a letter he got from someone. It's Viv going, oh, she wanted an autographed photo. And he's got the letter on the wall. And then there's this photo. That's Cameron's MK Ultra, where they do sensory deprivation. And then in the next scene, he goes, oh, there's a mutilated boy and my father dressed in drag. And it's like, oh, yeah, he's got a lot going on in that head of his.
Now, it's hard for me to see with the image here, but on the far right, the little boy, is there something up with his eyes?
Well, he says it's a mutilated boy, and it's a doll that's got holes in it, like it's been shot.
Yeah, I was looking at his right eye. That was of interest to me because Sally has put a case forward that Billy's blind in his right eye. So I was just wondering if he's trying to show something there as well. But the image is too small for me to take a closer look at it. So I'll do that when you send me the slides. I'll take a look.
Okay, yeah, it's in that One Man's Week. So the Grateful Dead they have like 10,000 hours of live recording. So they have an archivist, right? This new archivist, well, he's kind of new. He's Canadian. He puts out this tweet, and this is loaded. It's March 22nd, 33 years ago today. Grateful Dead played at Copps Coliseum. Copps Coliseum, there used to be a junior ice hockey league team that played there, and they were called the Dukes of Hamilton. It talks about they sang Hey Jude for the first time since '69. They also performed the final Believe It or Not. I just thought that was a loaded tweet.
Well, also take a look at the date 3/22, the Skull and Bones number.
Yes.
And we have 2023. 2 divided by 3 is 666.
Yeah, and the Beatles channel on Sirius Satellite Radio is 18. The Grateful Dead channel is 23.
Okay.
On Sergeant Pepper, he's got that patch that says OPP.
Right.
You think it's Ontario Provincial Police, but maybe it's Ontario Provincial Prince because of Hamilton, Ontario. I actually responded to this tweet. I took an image of Sergeant Pepper and I made the patch the center of it. So it just had Billy and George. But the patch was the very center. This tweet was removed and I was muted. So I can't follow Dave Lemieux anymore. I can't look up his account anymore.
So why would he do that?
I don't. I think I got too close.
Yep, that's exactly what happened.
And he is Canadian, so then I thought, well, does he have a link with Lakefield College?
Look, if he didn't know what you were talking about, then it would have stayed.
Yes.
So in my view, when you put that up, he knew exactly where you were going with that, and he took it down.
Well, look where he's going. He's talking about 33 years ago today, Grateful Dead played at Copps Coliseum in Hamilton, Ontario, where they performed Hey Jude for the first time since March 1st, 1969, sung by Brent Midland. The previous 2 versions of Hey Jude were sung by Pigpen. They also performed the final Believe It or Not. And Billy and Linda knew Pigpen. He was the one that died in 73. Billy made a photo film, a 9-minute photo film using Linda's photographs of the Grateful Dead. I couldn't find it for the longest time. I finally found it.
Well, the other thing, I'm looking at this post, and I don't want to get too conspiratorial here, but Copps Coliseum CC 33 again.
Yes, and Billy says that John got that patch from the motor pool, and I think he says something about the police motor pool. Copps Coliseum. It's not called Copps Coliseum anymore. They changed the name in the last couple of years, but that's a very loaded tweet.
And it's in Hamilton, Ontario.
And when I put that picture up with the OPP in the very center, I'm not directly blocked. Like, doesn't it? I think I'm just muted.
Maybe he muted you, yeah.
Can't look up that.
But it's weird. It's just weird that he would mute you for something like that, unless he knew what you were referring to.
He's Canadian, and it's a really strange story to me. He's like 17 years old in 1989, starts to tour with the Grateful Dead, and ends up in 2000 as their archivist.
Yeah.
I just wonder if there's some link. Who is Dave Lemieux? Who's his father? Who's this, are they Masons? This Grateful Dead's big organization, and they're linked in to all of this.
Yeah, if you're going to become an archivist for a band like the Grateful Dead or for the Beatles or for the Rolling Stones, you're going to be vetted every which way from Sunday.
Oh, and did I tell you? So I'm not sure what year it was, maybe 2020, Paul was nominated to be chief of the Walpole Native tribe in Canada.
He was?
Yes, and so was Ryan Reynolds. I think it was just, and this wasn't an honorary thing. It's a small tribe, 5,000 people. It's right on the border of Michigan and Ontario. They nominated these two to be chief. The person that nominated Paul also nominated Ryan Reynolds. Well, Ryan Reynolds is Canadian, so okay, but why Paul? Why Billy? Unless they know who he is. They dropped it. It didn't go anywhere, but somebody knows who he is in that tribe. Let's talk about Alexander Hamilton. This is the 10th Duke of Hamilton, so Billy's okay. This was, the man that James Hamilton that left the title to Billy's grandfather, Alfred. That was James, I think. This is his grandfather, Alexander. He was the 10th Duke of Hamilton.
Whose grandfather?
Billy's grandfather, Alfred. He got the title from his fourth cousin, James Hamilton.
Yep.
He left no sons. That James Hamilton, so he must have been the 12th Duke of Hamilton. This is his grandfather.
His grandfather.
His grandfather, the 10th Duke.
Okay.
So this guy believes that he's the heir to the Scottish throne because they're descendants of Mary, Queen of Scots regent. See, I've read it about the Douglas-Hamiltons, is that they believe that since Mary, Queen of Scots' son went to England, he became James the First of England, that somehow that made them the heir to the Stuart line in Scotland. And it's apparently why they are the premier peer of Scotland. Well, this guy believed that not only that, he should be on the Scottish throne. He was also into Egypt, and so he had his body mummified and he was buried in a sarcophagus. The reason I'm telling you this is because there's this idea that, well, I told you before, Manny P. Hall said the Egyptian Book of the Dead is the open sesame for symbolic Freemasonry. And supposedly it influences Druidic rituals and also Illuminati rituals. I've just read this in blogs and stuff. They take the Egyptian Book of the Dead and fashion rituals out of it and for programming. The part where he says, it's a Sir William chapter, the part where he says Helen got the family Bible, she got it from her own grandfather. And then he says that she got a manual from Arlene Crawford, which was her mother. Billy says it's his great-grandparents. Now, Arlene Crawford it's a fictional thing. And it took me a long time. I didn't separate the two. I thought when he said Helen put his name in the family Bible, that it was this family Bible that she put it in. But it was, you got to read that paragraph again. It was this manual because this Arlene Crawford, this fictional person, would handwrite out this illustrated booklet. It was handwritten, and she made a copy for all of her siblings. She made a copy for neighbors. She would trade it for oats. And then the neighbors would sometimes come back to her with other stories. It was supposedly a family history with other stories, and she would add it to this handwritten booklet. And that was what she put Billy's name in. And Crawford means blood oath. So I'm thinking this is Billy's way of saying the family Bible is the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The manual that Helen entered his name in was this manual for mind control. I know it's hard to follow. You've got to read that. Read the first paragraph in the Sir William chapter.
Okay.
It went over my head for a long time. But there's some things online about these survivors of these rituals, these kids, when they're such little kids and they can't really express, they draw pictures. They've taken these pictures and compared them to things in the Egyptian Book of the Dead And they're saying, look, they're getting the rituals out of the Egyptian Book of the Dead.
It's wild stuff.
I know. See, that's why it's taken me so long. I don't know how to even explain any of this shit. Okay, so these are two pieces of art. They're about a druidic ritual called the bringing of the mistletoe. I think they do it on the winter solstice. It's the ritual of the oak and the mistletoe, something like that. And they go into an oak tree. They cut them. The special druid guy cuts the mistletoe, lets it land on a sheet, and then they use it as a fertility thing, something. And then they sacrifice 2 white Highland cattle. That's interesting to me because the family seat for the Douglas-Hamiltons is Lennox Love House. So in 1979, son number 2, Angus, Billy's younger brother, he brought these white Highland cattle from Hamilton Park, which Hamilton High Park is where Hamilton Palace was. It was this grand, grand palace. Billy's grandfather, Alfred, had to tear it down in the 1920s. There were coal mines underneath it, compromised. It had to be torn down. But these Highland cattle have been there the whole time. And they're said to have been actually descended from Druids' cattle. And that's the kind they need for this ritual. So I thought it was interesting that they have these cattle there.
So this would say that Billy's family, his bloodline, are Druids?
They're Druids. Yeah. You don't know about the Druids these days, but they're still around. Charles' coronation was quite Druidic, wasn't it?
Yeah. Also, in John Lennon's song, in Mind Games, Lennon talks about some Druid dudes.
Mm.
Yeah,
Well,
John Lennon referenced Druid dudes in his song Mind Games, where the lyrics mention some kind of Druid dudes lifting the veil. Goes on to say that this line is part of a broader theme in the song that touches on spiritual and philosophical ideas, with Lennon drawing inspiration from the book Mind Games, The Guide to Inner Space by Gene Houston and Robert Masters. The song's lyrics also include lines like "Love is the answer and you know that for sure," and "Love is a flower, you got to let it grow," reflecting Lennon's advocacy for peace and love. So it goes on to say that the reference to Druid dudes has been interpreted in various ways, with some suggesting it relates to the counterculture movement and the exploration of spiritual practices. Maybe it was a reference to Billy.
yeah. And what did you say about Let It Grow again?
The song's lyrics also include lines like "Love is the answer, you know that for sure," and "Love is a flower, you gotta let it grow."
There's a whisper message in the book. I can't find it, but I saw it once. It says grow, glow, glow. There's no W's. It says GRO, GLO, GLO. Now, in this book that James wrote about his father, someone writes him a letter, and it's addressed to my dear Douglo. His name was Douglas-Hamilton. Sounds like his nickname was Douglo. So I wondered if that grow, glow, glow with no W's, no Billy, no William, is in reference to his father.
Could be.
Yeah, I don't know what they do with that white sheet that they let the mistletoe fall on, lifting the veil so that you could see what was really going on.
So either John Lennon was into the Druids, or John Lennon was perhaps making a reference to Billy.
Yes, he was definitely aware of them, wasn't he? Even when they made Prince Charles a Prince of Wales.
It could also be a reference to not only Billy, but the Beatles as a whole. Druid dudes. In other words, and I'm not saying the Beatles were Druids. Maybe Billy's connected to the Druids, but my point being is that there was a Druid influence tucked into the Beatles.
Yeah, I think it's a special club. I don't think they would let them into the Druids, but Billy's in it.
Again, folks, we're speculating.
Yeah.
But this is what makes it interesting.
And I wonder if he says his father's the magician, and he so wants people to figure it out, right?
He says he's the son of the magician, And it can go back. And another researcher, Wendy, brought this to my attention going back a while ago. I would say maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Isis was known as a great magician. So in the book, it tells us that he is allegedly the reincarnation of Horus, the savior figure. Well, who was Horus's mother? Isis. She was a great magician. Well, then he would be the son of the magician.
Ah,
That's just another way to look at it. I have no idea if that's what it really means, but it was a good point that Wendy brought up going back, I don't know, like I said, 2 or 3 years ago.
I remember you telling me about that last time. It's very interesting.
Yeah, but it could be something else. And and the other thing, Stacy, is, and I know you know this, these clues are layered. They could have multiple meanings. I think a big mistake that people make is they think that it can only have one meaning. And I don't know, having done the research for as long as I did, that is incorrect. Is it possible that a particular clue has one meaning? Yes. But generally speaking, I think it has multiple touch points.
And that's the same thing for any lyric of a song. It can mean whatever you see at the moment, really.
Yeah.
Well, so with these Highland cattle being brought up to Lennox Love House and now finding out that the families had control of these white Highland cattle that are from the Druids these years, and with his, the 10th Duke of Hamilton believing he was the heir to the Stuart line. I say, that anthropologist Robert Zepper, he has an account on Twitter.
Yeah.
One of his videos, he said that the Grandmaster Druid, it doesn't necessarily go from father to son, that it just has to be in a certain bloodline. It has to be in the Habsburg, Sinclair, or Stuart bloodline. And if the Douglas-Hamiltons believe that they are the heirs to the Stuart line, maybe Billy's father was the Grandmaster Druid. And there's that book, children's book, Grand Dude.
Yeah, where he's playing the bass right-handed on the front cover.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Well, okay then. Here's a picture of the coronation in 37. I just wanted you to see this because behind the Queen Mother, there's Helen. She's standing between the Queen Mother and Queen Mary. And then, wow, how powerful, right? And then to the right of the Archbishop is Elizabeth.
Okay, so let me get my bearings. The Queen Mother is sitting down?
Yes.
Okay, and behind her?
Is Helen, Billy's grandmother.
Billy's grandmother.
And then behind her, up on the platform, is Queen Mary.
To the left?
Yes. I mean, how much more connected can you be?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, this I'm getting from Springmeyer again, so salt to taste. He says formal approval of girls and boys into the Illuminati is done at a presentation by the Queen Mother and the Grand Druid Council at age 3. Creativity, strength, bloodlines, and intelligence are taken into consideration. And remember, he says the woman of renown identified him as a prodigy when he was 3.
Right.
And he also says some of the most brutal rituals happened when he was 3.
It's also interesting that many people will say that the Druids don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I'm thinking they do.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I'm wondering, I'm connecting it to this photograph because if this presentation, and I guess it says it's a approval into the Illuminati is done at a presentation by the Queen Mother and the Grand Druid Council. So this is the Queen Mother, and does this make Helen, or maybe even the woman of renown, which I think is Lady Ruth Fermoy, Diana's grandmother, does that mean they're on the Grand Druid Council? And the only other clue about the woman of renown is that she revered Billy's father for the things that he taught. What did he teach? Was he the Grand Master Druid? And she was on the council and somehow revered him that way? I don't know. Oh, the tiara she's wearing is the palmette tiara. The Northumberland, they all have their own different tiaras. That's the palmette tiara. There was another tiara of the Northumberlands. It was called the Strawberry Leaf. In 1963, Helen got it from the jeweler. She had an event that night, and it got stolen. She got mugged, and it got stolen. Somebody like broke the window of the car or something, reached in. She had a driver, but he was able to get this tiara. Okay, more about Robert Zepper's videos. He does videos on the Ahnenerbe. The Ahnenerbe was the anthropology arm of the SS in Germany. Now, Rudolf Hess's mentor was Karl Haushofer. These guys were going around the world. They went to Tibet. They got a swastika in Tibet. There's a society of green dragon men in Tibet, and they revere the swastika. Of course, it's an ancient symbol, right? Karl Haushofer went to see Hess after he was diagnosed with amnesia, and this is in James' book. He's saying to him, well, you remember Douglas-Hamilton. He's the one that sent me his book, the pilot's book of Everest. You remember him, don't you? And Hess said, well, it was Haushofer that knew Douglas-Hamilton so well. I didn't really know him. And even James is saying that's true. And Karl Haushofer, this Ahnenerbe, watch some videos of Robert Zepper's about the Ahnenerbe. Sounds like they were trying to confirm the fact that the Aryan race was descendants of people of Atlantis, and that when Atlantis sunk, that they believe when Atlantis sunk, that the survivors went around the world and they became the nobility, or they married into the nobility, and they blended in. And so all of these people think that they're descendants of gods.
Right.
Douglas Hamilton's link with the Germans may be more geared toward this idea of the Ahnenerbe. Maybe that's the reason he really flew over Everest. Maybe it was more than just a challenge. Maybe he was looking for something. And maybe that's why Haushofer and Hess were so interested in him and had him come to that banquet in Germany. Also, there's the, in the UK, you have the Rosicrucians, you have the Knights of the Rosy Cross. In Japan, you have the Knights of the Green Dragon. In Tibet, you have the Green Dragon Men. Green and red again. There's green and red. I don't know if I mentioned the other day in Waterfalls on the piano, there's a roll of duct tape and an ashtray full of cigarettes.
I think you did. Hold on. We talked about Waterfalls. Maybe you didn't mention. Tell me again.
Well, we were talking about, Dr. Cameron, and of course, Waterfalls, everything in Waterfalls is significant of something. And in that video, he's playing like a role of a 50s teenager, right? Well, on that piano, there's a roll of duct tape and a ashtray full of cigarettes. And I just wondered, with everything else, if that was supposed to be Dr. Cameron's duct tape and cigarettes. I wonder if he smoked.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, what was that video he did where he played, Billy played the psychologist?
Oh, with Emma Stone about
Yeah.
the song about the bullying. Yeah.
I thought that was interesting that he played that part.
Yeah, everything in that video is significant.
Oh, very significant. There's all of this mind control, programming, symbolism, spirals, everything's black and white.
That video was one of the things that got me to really take the Viv thing seriously. Because at first I had Viv back and forth in the fiction column to the nonfiction column. I was going back and forth with it. And in that video, one of the dancers, when they're in the elevator, sticks her finger in her nose like Viv would do.
Yeah.
Jumping around. And that's when I thought, oh, okay, he's begging us to see it.
He also made mention to Stanshall in that movie yesterday. There's a scene with Ed Sheeran, and Ed Sheeran mentioned the Ginger Geezer.
Yes.
And of course, Ginger Geezer was Vivian Stanshall. Also, in Peter Jackson's version of Let It Be, the Get Back sessions, there's a scene there where Billy is conversing I forgot who was there. Maybe Lennon was there, George Harrison, and, some of the entourage. And he mentions Canyons of Your Mind, which is a Vivian Stanshall Bonzo song.
I missed that.
Yeah. I remember because I was watching, and at the time I was putting these little video segments together to take my audience through, my thoughts, my reaction to each one of the parts that were released by Peter Jackson for his Get Back movie. And I'm listening to the dialogue. I'm like, hold on a second. Did he just talk about Canyons in Your Mind? And I played it back because I had I had it digitally saved on my hard drive. He sure did. So this is the thing. He does point to Stanshall periodically here and there. Even the song, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number.
Yes.
That's right out of the Bonzo playbook.
It is very Bonzo.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I saw that poster for the Dead and the Bonzos in October of '69, I thought, well, maybe it wasn't Billy. He was too busy. But that was Boston, October of '69. And in July of 2016, the Dead played Fenway Park 2 nights in a row. The next night, Billy played. And he brought Bob Weir, the Dead's rhythm guitarist, out on stage. And they sang a Wing song, Hi, Hi, Hi. The first line is, when I met you at the station, you had a bootleg in your hand.
Right.
And I went, okay, not only does Bob Weir know that that's Billy, he also knows it's Viv, which surprised me because I thought you can't let those guys know anything. They don't take anything seriously, but they're right in it. You don't have to scratch very deep to find out the Dead was Tavistock too.
But going back for a second, Stacy, when you say, when I met you at the station, you had a bootleg in your hand, how did you tie that back to Stanshall?
Well, in October of '69, the Grateful Dead and the Bonzos played a 3-day show in Boston. And when I first saw that poster, I just thought that couldn't have been Viv because he was too busy. And besides, the Grateful Dead, those guys were always such pranksters, they probably don't realize what's going on. Years later, when I saw that, and it's on YouTube, there's a video of Billy at Fenway Park in Boston, brings Bob Weir out on stage, and they go into that Wing song, Hi, 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 which was written in 1973. And it's all about, we'll get high, high, high.
Right.
You can imagine the Dead and the Bonzos in 1969. I'm sure they were high the whole time. So when the opening line is, when I met you at the station and you had a bootleg in your hand, I mean, the Dead is known for letting their fans record bootleg tapes.
Okay.
And Station, there's Egypt Station and there's Terrapin Station, which ties back to Lakefield College.
Right.
He knows exactly who he is. In fact, the Dead just had a 3-month thing at the Sphere in Las Vegas, and there's a photograph on Bob Weir's Twitter X where it's Bob, his wife, and Billy and his wife. So he went to one of the shows. So they're quite close.
Yeah, well, that would make sense because both were playing a huge part in all the social engineering that was taking place during the 1960s going into the 70s. And Billy played a big part, along with John Phillips and others, in putting together the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, where the CIA told local law enforcement to stand down as they were handing out LSD to all of the concert goers.
Yes, in my time of going to Dead shows, which I've been to a lot, the rumor was, well, the Dead, they bring their own security. So that's why it's so mellow. But, I was 17, 18 when that started. And so what did I know? Now I know that the police force is Masonic anyway.
Yes. It's crazy stuff.
They'd started recording all their shows in maybe '68. They have all the soundboard. That's why there's an archivist, right? Well, that show, the 3-day show they played with the Bonzos, there's no tape of that, supposedly. They're in there somewhere.
Yeah, of course, it's there.
Okay, this, I don't know where I got this, but it's about a book by Eustace Mullins. this person is saying the book, it's talking about a book by Eustace Mullins, The Curse of Canaan. The book goes in and shows in detail how the inhabitants of the British Isles came originally from Egypt. This is important because the Druidism of the British Isles was simply a derivative from the Egyptian satanic witchcraft / magic of ancient Egypt. So when I was talking about maybe that Bible that Helen got from her grandfather was actually the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and maybe the handwritten manual she got from her own mother was a manual on how to mind control. So thought. And then this, and I don't know, I got this from a blog or something, so whatever, but I thought it was interesting. Illuminati rituals are based upon the most ancient mystery religions. The Rothschilds like Canaanite Babylonian rituals. The Collins Sinclair type Illuminati bloodlines are very much into Druid rituals. So I thought that was interesting. Trying to move on. This is about how Egyptian Satanism is connected to the Book of the Dead and child abuse and that. So I just thought I'd show you that.
Well, this is interesting because I have explained to my audience that this occultism goes back to the Egyptian mysteries and the Babylonian mysteries. So the question I have, though, is that, in fact, Manly P. Hall mentions in his book, Secret Teachings of All Ages, he said that the controllers, the people that are running things, that they bastardized the mysteries. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to paraphrase here. He says that they took the divine white magic and they use it for black magic.
Remember what this is now. This is that blog I was telling you about the other day where they took the artwork of kids that were maybe too young to describe what happened to them.
Yeah.
And they were comparing it to things they found in the Book of the Dead. And that's what this is where the quote is from Manny P. Hall. The Book of the Dead is the open sesame of symbolic masonry. And I hear what you're saying about they took the white magic because there's that Egyptian, I guess you call it a hieroglyph, where they have the bird-headed humans that are holding a scale.
Yes.
On one side is the feather of truth and the other side is the heart. And I think the intention was to say, well, after you're dead, we weigh your heart against the feather of truth to see if you're worthy for divinity.
Right.
But these people like to invert everything. So they've taken that into maybe some real life stuff with the heart and blood and who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, well, something is up. And what I mean by that is Egyptian symbolism is everywhere. It's all around us.
Yes.
So they're definitely leveraging Egyptian symbolism and the mysteries. And there has to be a reason for that.
Well, have you ever heard of Sean Fross, Hross?
No.
His first name is spelled Sean. I believe it's worth looking into. I believe he's Swiss. He's been taken off YouTube, but you can find his stuff on Yandex. And in fact, that's what this next slide is. This is from him. You know how everyone's all, okay, at the top of the pyramid is the Vatican bankers, and others will say, well, no, it's the Jesuits that infiltrated the Vatican bankers, or it's the City of London, or it's the Illuminati. Well, Sean Ross's thing is it's the pharaohs, and they ended up somehow through the Knights Templar founding Switzerland in 1291, because that's when the King of France was going after the Knights Templar. So they go to Switzerland and they found Switzerland in 1291. And ever since, he thinks this is the headquarters for all this Pharaoh stuff and where the obelisks are all coming from. And, the bankers do bank in Switzerland.
Yes.
Big bankers bank in Switzerland anyway. He's got some interesting stuff. He's saying that quote in the Bible where it talks about Pharaoh disappeared into the sea. He's saying this, it's the Sea of Peoples. Like they went in kind of like they believe about the Atlanteans. They just dispersed and went in and got themselves in all these noble families. And he's saying these pharaohs are all in the positions of power. And that's why there's obelisks all over the world. And he points out that if you take a 3D pyramid and you imagine pushing it from the top, pushing it flat, that when it's flat, it looks like a Knights Templar cross. I've heard Sean Ross talk about names that end with Stein or Steen.
Yeah.
That lets you know they're part of this pharaonic thing because it means stonemason. And I thought, oh, well, that's interesting because Linda's family's real name, and it is mentioned in the book that that's her family's real name.
Right.
Before Eastman.
The book also alludes to, I'm going to say the possibility that she was related to Brian Epstein.
Him too.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of different factions that think they're going to run the New World Order. I wonder if when it gets down to it, if they're going to take each other out. That'd be nice.
Well, they might wind up eating each other, that's for sure, because, I tried to explain this when I talk to people. They have all of their flacks out there, right? The people that think that they're part of the inner circle because they're doing work on their behalf. But as they perceive that they're accomplishing more and more, then they don't need all of the people or touch points that were once there to try to pull everything in. So once they start to accomplish, again, from their perspective, that circle is going to get smaller and smaller, and they're not going to need all of these people that are the useful idiots and the enablers that are in place right now. So they will wind up being jettisoned because that piece of the agenda has been accomplished. So I don't need you anymore. So you've become obsolete. So I think eventually what will happen is it will start imploding on itself, going back to your point. And I expect there will be a lot of fighting within the inner circle of the control system because it's going to get to a point where who's really in control. Right now, they're controlling based upon a federation of families and secret societies. But ultimately, if they get to where they want to go, I don't know. I don't see that federation being as large, and they're going to have to start whittling it down. And that's where there's going to be some fireworks. Just a thought. Did that make any sense? I hope it made sense.
It made sense. And I wonder if ultimately it won't need any humans at all. It'll just be an AI thing anyway.
That's what it is. They want AI to run things so that they don't have to spend as much time managing the population. If they can get the artificial intelligence to do most of the heavy lifting, that frees up a lot of time if you're an elitist.
Yeah, and then ultimately that AI won't need the elite either.
Right. There was an interview recently with Peter Thiel, and he was tied into Palantir.
Yes.
Right. And he was asked a question about the future of humanity, and he just stumbled all over himself. He was taking the conversation in the direction of total transhumanism, an augmented race where there's a merging of man and machine or man and technology. So that's definitely where they're going, or that's definitely where they want to go. But unfortunately, we see too many people embracing the exact same thing that's going to imprison them or have them end up in a gulag somewhere. Yeah.
I'm glad I'm as old as I am.
Yeah. I say that all the time. I'm just happy to be where I'm at right now in my life because I've been doing this a long time, and I have to be honest with you. Sometimes I feel like I'm just shoveling against the tide.
Okay, you know how you can't find out from anyone. I'm into astrology, and I wondered when the age of Aquarius really began.
Yeah.
Seems like nobody knows. I saw this from this occultist, Samuel Onwar. I think he changed his name to that. Anyway, he says it started February 4th, 1962. There's other astrologers that say it's not going to start it's a long period of time and it won't officially start for another 100 years. But I thought it was interesting that it was 1962 when they declared war on Christianity, right? According to the book.
September 11th, he said the Illuminati declared war on Christianity. 1962, yep.
Edward Gibbon was that historian. And I guess the Illuminati commissioned him in the 1770s to look into the Roman Empire and find out what it is that went wrong, because they want empire back, and they don't want to lose it again. His conclusion was, he wrote that 6-volume set. His conclusion, from what I understand, I've never read it, was that if it weren't for Christianity, then the Roman Empire would still exist. So that might be a big reason why they declared war on it, is because of his work, Edward Gibbon.
The dates that I have heard about when the Age of Aquarius first kicked off, if we equate the Age of Aquarius with the Aeon of Horus, Crowley's Aeon of Horus, Crowley claims that it began in the early 1900s. Now, he could have been referring to the actual beginning of the transition to table setting. Then there's the December 21st, 2012. That was the whole Mayan calendar deal.
Yes.
And they were talking about end times and stuff like that. That was actually a reference to the end of the Piscean age and entering into the Age of Aquarius. So I don't know. And I agree with you that depending upon what source you read, you get different time frames. I tend to lean toward December 21st of 2012 only because of all of the hoopla around the Mayan calendar. So I view that as something took place astrologically. The stake in the ground they used for the profane was the Mayan calendar. But if we pull the curtain back, something more important to the controllers actually took place. So I don't know. I don't know. It could be February 4th, 1962. It could have been the early 1900s. It could have been December of 2012. I don't know.
It could be 100 years from now.
Could be 100 years from now. Yeah.
So supposedly it was the time of Jesus that brought in the Age of Pisces.
Yeah.
Before that was the ram, and about 2,000 years before that was the bull.
Right.
Called the Age of Mithras. Do you remember anything about Halsey's typhoon from World War II? Do you know about that?
No.
Okay, I only know about this because my neighbor, he's gone now, but he was World War II vet, and he told me how it was December 1944, his brother died somewhere in the South Pacific in something they call Halsey's typhoon. Admiral Halsey was in charge of the South Pacific something. There was a super typhoon coming, and Halsey ordered aircraft carriers and all kinds of 790 men into the path of this storm, which is like a Category 5 hurricane, 160 mile an hour winds, 90-foot waves. 790 men died. Halsey goes back to Washington. You'd think he would have been court-martialed or something. Nothing happened to him. But then there's Billy's song, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, where he sings hands across the water, hands across the sky.
Yeah.
I think, well, is that Masonic hands? Was this a ritual, a sacrifice?
That's what I was thinking when you said 790 men lost their lives. I thought to myself it was probably a ritual.
Yeah, and I don't know about this, but I would ask him if he was still around, but I could have sworn that my neighbor told me his brother died in a submarine. And I remember thinking, oh, that's awful, because I'm claustrophobic. That's just horrific. But when I read anything about it, there's no mention of submarines. So I don't think we know the truth. Also, a submarine could just go deeper. Yeah, right in the center of the storm, he had left these guys sitting ducks. And there's Billy singing about it. I think he knows a lot about military stuff. Norwegian Wood was a British Army operation in World War II. Whatever it was, it failed. But he seems to know about that too, have information about that as well. Okay, so I sent you that video of Yvonne.
Yeah, she was singing the song.
Yeah, it's interesting. You saw two stand-ins, lookalikes. I only saw the one. But anyway, Yvonne, that's feminine for Ivor. Yvonne means yew tree, and a yew tree, it's the favorite wood to make bows from for shooting arrows. So in that video, see the gun, how it's lined up with the cord, with the microphone cord, and then it blends just like this, right in a row. First he's behind the cord.
Okay, yes.
Then the middle one, if you slow it down, that's what it appears like. And then the last one is and I've never seen an image of Paul with a gun before, but it's like the cord and the gun are just lined up in the same spot. Is he trying to say that Paul took himself out? I wondered. There is the lyric about he blew his mind out in a car. He didn't notice that the lights had changed.
I don't know.
And then I found out there's this military term called broken arrow, where if you're in a position that can't be defended, you'll call the headquarters and say, go ahead and take us out because we're going down anyway. So go ahead and attack our position, even though to get these enemies, even though it's going to take us out because we're in a position that's not defendable.
Right. So you sacrifice your own men.
Yes. It's all symbolic in that Yvonne and what a yew tree is about. Then I see this ad for longbow. Yew longbow, simply put, the Aston Martin of historical bows. Oh, I wanted to tell you this, that in Lagos, Nigeria, the Masonic Lodge is on Broad Street, and it was there where he says he tells a story about getting his demo tape stolen.
Yes.
And then he goes back and he makes that movie, Give My Regards to Broad Street. Well, maybe he really did get his demo tape stolen, and maybe thanks to the Masons, he got him back. And maybe that's why he named the movie Give My Regards to Broad Street in Lagos, Nigeria.
Anything with him is possible.
Yeah. The mad honey, the mad honey is, you can get mad honey from, is it Tibet? Anyway, those mad honeybees feed off rhododendrons. When he says Paul's pushing up rhododendrons, I thought he meant somewhere in Scotland because rhododendron are in the heath family and heather heath family, but they were in March of 1968. They were in India. He says the Rolling Stones sent the flowers to the funeral. He's talking about the album, the Rolling Stones album. But there is that image of them in March of 1968 where they're at some kind of banquet and they're all wearing leis around their neck, flower leis. And it was 18 months after exactly. And so I wondered if Paul isn't, or part of him, like Osiris, it's in 14 parts, part of him isn't somewhere in northern India, Tibet, where the mad honey grows. And that's why he was talking about it.
Okay. So are you saying that a part of Paul is in India?
Yeah. When he says that Paul's pushing up rhododendrons. Wherever he's buried, he's pushing up rhododendrons. And then he starts talking about the mad honeybees. Well, these mad honeybees, they can only be found in that area around the Himalayas. So not far from northern India where their meditation center was. And we know they went there in 1968, February, March 1968. And there are those photographs of them. It looks like some kind of banquet where they're all wearing flower leis. Ringo's not there. He'd left in February. But I wonder if that was some kind of funeral and that if they didn't take part of Paul, because it's like Osiris. Osiris was in 14 pieces, right?
I just recovered 13 of the 14.
Okay. So maybe when he says he's pushing up rhododendrons, instead of meaning heather in Scotland, he means part of him is somewhere in the Himalayas. It would have been a good opportunity for them to, I don't know, distribute that.
Yeah, I remember the image you're talking about. I'll find it and put it into the presentation.
Yeah, because he does say Rolling Stones sent the flowers as if it was a funeral.
Well, very interesting, Stacy. I love the fact that you have the perspective that you have. I mean, you really think outside the box. Once you break out of the traditional Paul is dead narrative.
This is all over.
Yeah, it's all over the place.
You try to walk away and then something hits you, and it's like a never-ending puzzle. It never ends.
It's like a million-piece puzzle that was scattered to the wind, and you're trying to find all of those pieces. But there's no question, this is one of the most elaborate conspiracies in modern times. That's why some people, they don't get it. Like, I don't know why you're talking about a band or Paul being replaced and Paul is dead and all this stuff. We have all these other things going on in the world and they're more important. I'm thinking to myself, that's because you don't understand what this particular conspiracy is showing you.
And it does. It touches on everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to explain to folks who bring up that type of argument. If you understand this, then that's going to allow you to understand a whole lot of other stuff that's going on in the world. And it also shows you the extent that for lack of a better term, the deep state will go to invest in these psychological operations. All right, Stacy, I didn't mean to hold you so long.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Okay, you have a great week. And like I said, in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'll send you the link.
All right. Thanks,
All
Mike.
right. Bye-bye.
Take care.